Intel's 12th Gen CPU in Alder Lake is a new hybrid architecture. Why did Intel choose to go with big performance cores and little efficiency cores with its x86 CPUs? Was Intel influenced by Apple? Let's get into it. Intel is making a significant change by choosing what they term as a hybrid architecture for their CPUs. The concept for using big cores and little cores is not new and has been in use in ARM CPUs for years. Many ARM-based products like those in phones and tablets use this very architecture as it helps to balance performance and power consumption. Even Apple uses it in their iPhones and iPads and has chosen it for Apple Silicon Macs instead of using Intel CPUs. Selecting this hybrid architecture is a big gamble for Intel. And after using Apple's M1 Mac Mini on the desktop for most of the year, started to wonder, why? Why did Intel choose to go with this architecture for a desktop CPU? For its flagship, the i9-12900K CPU, you are getting 8 big cores for performance and 8 little cores for efficient operation. For a desktop CPU, why do I need 8 little cores? Why can't I have just more bigger cores? In Apple's M1 Pro and M1 Max chips, they actually reduced the number of efficiency cores from 4 in the original M1 to now just 2. Now I covered that in great detail in my video, link above and in the description below. So Apple is moving to fewer efficiency cores and more performance cores for its more powerful machines, whereas Intel will include more efficiency cores with those performance cores for its more powerful CPUs. That's the opposite philosophy. It seems so counterintuitive. Why do I need more efficiency cores for higher performance on the desktop? Why? I went through the Intel Architecture Day materials and they all talk about performance per watt, and that all sounds good, but it still doesn't really answer my question of their opposite philosophy and why that is needed for a desktop. Now, this counterintuitive feeling comes from my direct experience with both the M1 Mac Mini and ThreadRipper. For those who are new to the channel, I built an inexpensive system based on ThreadRipper, and that system has changed how I work. With 64 gigabytes of quad-channel RAM and all those cores and threads, I am able to just multitask at will. I can be editing a video in Final Cut, editing photos in Photoshop, working in audio in Logic Pro, having OBS running, doing research with Chrome and having 30 to 40 tabs open, all while having Discord open, a YouTube video playing. I could not do all of these things simultaneously with my M1 Mac Mini. The M1 with its 8 cores just didn't feel like 8 cores. It didn't even feel as capable like the 8 cores in my Big Mac build with the i9-9900K. The M1 would just get overwhelmed sooner and then have to rely on the efficiency cores. And once that happened, the M1 would just hit a wall. By that I mean I would get the spinning beach ball and I would have to wait for it to respond. So based on that experience, for a desktop system, I would prefer more performance cores than efficiency cores. So again, why is Intel doing the opposite? First, let's quickly review what is Alder Lake. I put together a chart summarizing Intel's 12th Gen CPUs for the desktop that will be the first to release. This Alder Lake generation combines both Golden Cove cores, which are the performance cores, with the Gracemont cores, which are the efficiency cores, to create the hybrid architecture that is Alder Lake. Starting with the flagship i9-12900K, we can see that it has 8 performance cores and then 8 efficiency cores. Moving to the i7-12700K, it has the same 8 performance cores, but with only half of the efficiency cores. Finally, the i5-12600K has 6 performance cores and 4 efficiency cores. So as you scale up from the i5 to the i7, you get 2 additional performance cores with the same number of efficiency cores. Then, when you scale up from the i7 to the i9, you add 4 additional efficiency cores with the same number of performance cores. To get some insight as to why Intel would have chosen this new direction, let's consider the scenario if Intel would have continued releasing CPUs, as in the past, with just the big CPU cores only. What if Intel did what they always have done and just used performance cores only? The 12th Gen would use the new Golden Cove cores, and that would be Alder Lake. For the i9-12900K, in the space that they have for the efficiency cores, they could just replace them with performance cores, and the i9 would then have 10 performance cores. The i7-12700K would just remove the efficiency cores and have 8 performance cores, and the i5-12600K would also remove the efficiency cores and have just 6 performance cores. If this configuration for the i5, i7, and i9 sounds familiar, it is. This represents what Intel already did back in the 10th generation Comet Lake CPUs that were released back in 2020. If Intel would have executed this strategy, then they would have had the benefits of the performance cores with 2 more of them in the i9. Now Intel shared a chart showing the general purpose performance advantage of 19% over its 11th gen Rocket Lake CPUs. If we assume the same frequencies and just calculate a 19% performance improvement over Rocket Lake, then we can estimate a score in Cinebench R20 for the i5 and i7. For the i9, we'll have to account for it having 2 additional cores along with that 19% improvement. So when looking at a generational improvement, the i5 and i7 would show a very nice improvement, with the i9 with the 2 additional cores would be a great improvement from Rocket Lake, but how would that compare to AMD's Ryzen 5000 series? If we step back and compare 11th gen Rocket Lake to Ryzen 5000 CPUs, we can see that the i5 is competitive with the 5600X, and the i7 is trailing the 5800X by about 10%. But when you look at the i9, it's just a joke. It's not in the same league as a Ryzen 9. Now I talked about how Intel could have turned that into a success in my video, link above if you're interested, so let's not dwell on that one here. Putting it all together and now adding those estimated scores of the 12th gen with performance cores only, the story becomes very obvious. The 12th gen would look very good in the i5 and i7 categories, however, it would still be a problem with the i9. While the i9 would have been 5% ahead of the 5900X, it would have been 13% behind the 5950X. But that's an optimistic view. We didn't address the issue of the additional heat due to the additional extra power needed to power 2 additional performance cores. Intel's 10nm SuperFin is not as efficient when running at 5 GHz all-core turbo. To add 2 additional cores would just have consumed too much power. That would have required them to step down the all-core turbo frequency closer to 4.5 GHz or less. That means the Cinebench R20 multi-core score would have dropped down to around 8,000. That would have left it 5% lower than a 5900X and 22% behind the 5950X. Reviewers would just have concluded that the i9 is still not in the same league as the 1-year-old 5950X. By the way, if you like videos like these, hit that like button and consider subscribing, and let me know in the comments below, are you looking forward to having little efficiency cores in your next desktop CPU? If Intel decided to go down its traditional path of just having performance-only cores, based on the estimates shown, the flagship i9 would just not have been competitive with the Ryzen 9. So they had to choose another path to make the i9 competitive again. Now that we understand why they needed to go in a new direction, how would this combination of performance and efficiency cores enable Intel not to only be competitive with the 5950X, but also to crush the Ryzen 5 and Ryzen 7? We'll cover that next time. Check out one of my previous videos in the links above for a little more background, or on one of these cards shown here. Thank you all so very much for watching. Stay safe, and I will see you in the next one.